started.
Hi folks, first of all, I just want to thank you on behalf of Commissioner Lathen for being here today. We know how busy our lives all get, so we appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to come out this afternoon. The DAB and Jack is representing them today have graciously allowed us to come in a town hall capacity for Commissioner Lathen to meet with constituents and citizens and talk to them specifically about the issues going on now in the county. We're not here today campaigning. The Disabled American Veteran Hall is a non-political entity and we respect that. And no campaigning will take on during the meeting inside this building. However, in the parking lot after the meeting, we will have yard signs for you to take. We will have literature and flyers for you to take if you would like to. If you have to leave early and cannot stay for the whole meeting, I'll be kind of sitting in this back area. You can flag me and I'll be happy to walk outside with you if you wanted to get some yard signs, bumper stickers, or literature as you leave. Commissioner Lathen usually just starts off the meetings with going over what they've been doing in the county, and then she usually opens it up to question and answer afterwards. So that's kind of how it flows. We see a lot of familiar faces, some new faces. We're glad you're here today. Now the Commissioner, go for it.
Thank you, Carla. And I do, I'm looking around. We often start off with a pledge. Is there a flag anywhere?
You're wasted.
I can get one.
You're right.
Yeah.
I do like to, if you don't mind, I'd like to start off with a pledge, and that's just something that's very important. So we'll hold on and see if I can find a flag. I should have done that when I first walked in, but I guess I thought it was here, so we'll see what he comes up with. And then we're just going to, I'm going to talk about a few different issues that we're working on in the county. Obviously, oil and gas is a very, very big one. I want to talk about that. And a few other things, and it is very open format. I always like to just have an open format with everybody, take any kinds of questions that are on your mind. And if I can't find the answer, if I don't have the answer right here, right now, I'll go out and find it and get back with you. So we'll just have a kind of an open forum. And if we don't have one, well, we might just get started.
I think your bandana's a great
Well, I think that's it. You got a postage stamp. All right. This is technically any clothing. There it is. There we go.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, now we got two of them.
Uh-oh.
Okay. That's good. No, bring it on up. This is a small one. We'll do that. If everybody would please rise, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right. So, folks, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm your District 2 County Commissioner, and we are. This is another opportunity to talk about issues in the county, and especially, of course, the oil and gas issue that we are dealing with right now. So I kind of want to talk about where we've been and what we're doing in the county, and some of the things that are frustrating us, some of the things that we see as potential at the legislature. We have Ron Tech with us today. He works with us at the county as our legislative. Well, we'll call you Guru. Should we call you Guru? We'll call him.
Don't call me goofy.
Okay. Well, it could be legislative, goofy guru, whatever. But no, Ron does a great job as he tracks the legislation, and the county is an arm of the state of Colorado. So we get our authority from the state. That's how counties were formed originally. And so when legislation is passed at the state level, we watch that very closely because that often has a great impact on what we do here. Much of what we do is based on mandates that we receive from the state level or the federal level. That's just the way it works at the local level of government. And when you look at it from a budgetary standpoint, for example, over half of our budget has the spending that's required in our budget is restricted by those kinds of mandates that we have to spend. So we work very hard to try to have the discretion that we want to have, that local control that we want to have here on a number of issues, and so we watch legislation very carefully because often that comes in and has a great impact on what we do, which obviously has a great impact on you. Our primary, to me, our fundamental responsibility at the county level is the protection of private property rights. Now, that is a large topic, and it's one that can mean a lot of different things. It doesn't just mean necessarily that that one piece of property is that one that we protect, because that one piece of property may have a dramatic impact on other people's property rights around it. So there's a balance that has to be struck, and the law strikes that balance for us in some ways, and in other ways we have to make decisions on land use items that make sure that we are protecting property rights. That is fundamental to our freedom. The other thing that we do, obviously, mostly, besides land use, is our infrastructure, our transportation systems, and keeping up with our roads, and making sure that we are prioritizing the dollars that you pay in your property taxes to those services that we are mandated and responsible to take care of. The property taxes that you pay of the property, let's say you pay $1,000 a year. We get about 10%. That's what goes to the county. That's the average across the county of what comes into El Paso County. Of that 10%, then we take that money in and we allocate that out to those restricted spending lines that we're mandated to pay, and then into things like the sheriff's office, for example, into the district attorney's office, the treasurer, the clerk recorder, those autonomous offices that we allocate the funds to. Then we have our road and bridge fund, and we have to take care of the requirements that we have within the Department of Human Services, health, and things like that. So that's kind of just a real quick snapshot of what happens when you pay those property taxes and what comes into El Paso County, and what we do then on our board to take those dollars and allocate them. Within those dollars, then, like I said, there are some discretionary line items that are not mandated by the state, and that's when we have to get to the business of prioritizing how we spend those dollars. And again, to me, that's fundamentally our roads, all that infrastructure. So as we're going along, then we have this new burgeoning industry. I'm going to transition right into oil and gas. Oil and gas has been a part of the state of Colorado for decades now. They have, there's the Wattenberg fields up in the northern part of the state that have been in production for many, many, many years, almost all of which are fracked wells. That's essentially the process that extracts the mineral, whatever they're going, whether it's not the mineral necessarily, but whether they're going for natural gas, whether they're going for oil. The play that people are looking for here, these companies seem to be looking for here in El Paso County, is actually oil, whereas you can go up to the northern part of the state and you're primarily extracting natural gas. So we've had some wells drilled in El Paso County in the past, but we haven't seen any significant production take place in El Paso County. And I don't know whether that's because they didn't hit anything, or whether it's because they didn't hit anything in large enough quantities to make it worth their while. But the fact is that we have had wells drilled in El Paso County and haven't produced anything. So we don't have production infrastructure in place in El Paso County that, like you'll see in a well field like Pinedale, Wyoming, where you have a huge number of wells and underground pipe systems, and that they are producing 1.3 billion cubic feet of natural gas every single day, and you don't see it on the roads because it's not in the trucks, it's in the pipelines. We don't have that kind of infrastructure here in El Paso County. And yeah, it could happen. Who knows? I have no idea whether that will happen or not. It could happen, and what's been going on in the last couple of years is that oil companies have been coming in and they've been leasing land in El Paso County, and they've been buying land in El Paso County. So clearly there's something that there's interest, that they have an interest in. I don't believe that they would come in and have this kind of activity if they were not thinking that there'd be something here. And we've had some discussions with some of them. I've talked to some geologists, and they do believe that the Niobrara Shale Formation is one that has a great potential to produce what they consider a mid to high grade oil here in El Paso County. Again, it remains to be seen whether that will happen, but that's what they're interested in. That play, as you will, is roughly an average of about 6,000 to 7,000 feet down across the county in the places where they're looking right now. That's where they would be looking to extract that through the fracking process. And so now you have all these companies that have come in and they've leased, and they're buying land, and they're looking to do all of this, and they have to go through the state to get their permits to drill well. And then they were coming to us to get a permit to go out and basically a land use permit. And up until now, El Paso County has had nothing in our land development code to address the production for exploration for oil and natural gas. So those few that have come through in our system under a temporary use permit process, which is kind of the same permitting process that we use for a fireworks stand or a fruit stand or something like that. That's the same kind of process. So we really just don't have anything in our code to deal with oil and gas production. And that matters for a number of reasons. Obviously, we have an obligation to protect our infrastructure. All those roads that I talked about, those are owned by all of you. And when you stand up a well, just your standard well, you're probably looking at 1,000 to 1,200, maybe 1,500 truck trips. Those are big trucks on those roads. And that beats up the roads. So we have to pay attention to that. What about our groundwater? Groundwater in eastern El Paso County is everything. It's game, set, match. You have to have water. So what kinds of impacts are these companies going to have on our water? Then there are other surface issues that we need to deal with. And so as they are coming in and people began to come to us and say, hey, somebody wants to lease my land and I don't quite know what to do, well, we don't get involved in a private lease. A lease between any company and a private landowner that's a private transaction. We don't have any place there, but they are still saying, what do we do? What do we do? We can't get that advice, but they began to say, well, what about this? And is this, can they do this? And what is the county going to do? So we've been going through a process for quite some time, certainly over a year, intensely in the last year, in taking a look at this and saying, hey, first of all, do we really have an issue here in El Paso County, a burgeoning issue? If so, what concerns do we have? I think we all know what the articulated concerns are. And what is our authority? What can we really do? And we have been going through a process of working with the state and trying to figure out what that authority really is. Some of it is frankly quite clear, and honestly, some of it's pretty murky. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission is an agency of the state that regulates the production and exploration of oil and natural gas, and they are very, very involved in that. They have an extensive regulatory scheme in place, and essentially we are constantly being told by people all around that we cannot regulate anything beyond that which the state already regulates. That means we don't, if the state regulates setback distances, we can't make them more onerous than the state. We can mirror that, put it in our local regulations, but we can't make them more so. We cannot do anything, we cannot regulate anything downhole. So when it comes to the process of fracking, when it comes to the chemicals in fracking, when it comes to the casing on a well is everything. And if you want to, we can go into what fracking really means and what that process is. And I can describe that to you. But when we talk about anything downhole, we don't have the authority to regulate that. We did take a stand asking for disclosure with the state a couple of months ago. As a board, we went and said, look, we realize that we can't tell you what chemicals you can use to frack, but we believe that you ought to tell us what chemicals you're using. And that doesn't mean that we know that we can't tell you what your formula is. That's proprietary. It's protected by law. We can't make you tell us that. But we just want to know of the 600, 800 chemicals that, the broad range of chemicals that can be used, and that's obviously geologically dependent on where they're drilling, that those 8 or 9 or 10 chemicals that you are using in that well, that you just let us know what those are. And oh, by the way, in addition to that, what about a marker in your fracking fluids that would show us something that as a secondary defense, if something were to be contaminated, then we can go back and say either you are exonerated because we don't find your marker in that contamination, or you are the one who did it. And we can make sure that that landowner then knows exactly where to go for the remediation. And there is remediation that's built into the state and federal regulations. So all these questions that we're trying to put together, we have to be very careful to be balanced in what we're doing in the reality of our authority. And we have a lot of different, we're getting a lot of different input into what that authority really is. Some folks saying you've got more, some folks saying you've got less. Now, add to the complication the fact that at the state legislature, we were looking at probably two pieces of legislation that compete with one another. It's the best way I would describe them, and I don't know if you have the bill titles or the numbers on them yet. Do you have those?
I don't. Only one of them has been introduced so far. You're
Right.
talking about the local control versus the state control.
Yes, yes.
The local control one, I think, has been introduced, and I've not seen the other one.
Okay, so really two different pieces of legislation. One that would push more local control down to the county level, where we would have more authority over the actual drilling process, the drilling sites. The other that would essentially force conformity throughout the state, that would essentially tighten up the state's hold on this and say, no, we cannot have 64 different sets of regulation across the state of Colorado. The state will govern this and nobody else. Those are very competing pieces of legislation. And we don't know what is to be expected coming out of this legislative session. So will we be given more authority at the local level? And if we are, then what will we regulate? And we've already done a lot of work to know that what the things that we have concerns over. And is that prudent? Is that what we should be doing? And oh, by the way, how do we enforce that? Do we have the expertise? Do we have the enforcement mechanism, the dollars to be able to enforce those kinds of things? If the state gets more authority and takes away even the little bit that we do have, then what's that look like for us, especially as it relates to our infrastructure? So what we are trying to do, again, is recognize that there are concerns on all sides, and I assure you, I get calls on this every single day, emails, letters, every single day on this issue, and it runs the gamut. It truly, truly does. I mean, we must be balanced in this. We must be, for me, I'm speaking, I can't speak for other commissioners. I could ask Jim to jump in. He used to be a commissioner, and I could have you just jump on in here and give me your opinion on this. But I need to be very, very calm and pragmatic going forward in this, and be looking for the facts. I want to look at science. I want to look at the history of the geology here in the state of Colorado. I want to look at the law and what my authority truly is. I don't want to sit and struggle against something over which I have no control. If I can't do it, I don't want to be struggling with something, because that's a waste of energy. And instead of wasting it at this level, we need to go to our state level and say, this is the authority that we think we need. And here's why. We need to articulate that in all this legislation and get that passed so that we have that authority. So that's the kind of approach that we're trying to take. And we had, and anything that I'm missing, don't worry. I'm gonna shut up here, and you guys can ask questions, and we'll fill in the gaps. But as we're going along, we want, again, we want to be very pragmatic. We want to do the best we can for the constituents here, and we have to recognize everything. We have to recognize that there's no question that there are concerns about water contamination. There are a lot of concerns that are coming up, things that folks are dealing with in other states, things that we're not sure about, things that have been reported that have been debunked, other things that have been reported and are absolutely true. But we also have to remember that we've got private property rights to defend, because if you have 100 acres somewhere and you have leased that land to develop the mineral rights that you own, that's your property, and we have to be protecting that as well. And that we have an economic impact, and that perhaps there is something here that could be responsibly developed and create jobs and be something that could be good for El Paso County. There are a lot of ways to look at this, and there are a lot of benefits, and there are a lot of there are negatives, there's no question. But best practices going forward are what we're trying to accomplish. And again, I can't reiterate enough that we can only accomplish those things through the reality of the authority that we have. So we have gone through all this process. We've had numerous town hall meetings this summer, work sessions, lots of public meetings, individual discussions. I have gone out. I've gone to the oil fields. I have tried to. I know more now about fracking and drilling than I ever thought I'd know, and I still only know that much. But really going out and educating myself, because I don't want to be making decisions when I can't tell you what it sounds like when a fracking truck is running. When I can't tell you what that fluid feels like, because it's a very thick fluid, and why do they have that thick, and why do they put that proppant in there, and how does the geology work, and what is the science of getting that resource out of the ground, and How about the light pollution that comes from the site? And how long do they have all that on the site? Because the majorly intensive portion of any drilling site is the exploratory portion. It's when they're standing up the well. Once they've got it all set and running, then it's rather low impact. And then you have reclamation come in, and they reclaim that land, and a lot of people don't even know they're driving by a well. Depends on what the site is, but in most cases, people don't even realize what they're driving by. If you drive up in the northern part of Colorado, just drive north on I-25. There are wells, there are 17,000 wells in Will County alone. It's over 17,000 wells. And I'm telling you, they are right up along the interstate. They're right up next to people's houses. They're out in the fields, and they're planting corn around them, and a lot of people have no idea that they're there. Now, I'm not saying good or bad or otherwise, but they're there. So I've gone through a tremendous educational process for myself personally. Some other members of our board have done the same things. We've been reading, we've been having these sessions, and our staff at a certain point, we individually as commissioners, and I can't tell you what each commissioner did, I'm not sure exactly what everybody did, but I took a hard copy and slid it across the table to our staff, and I said, from what we're learning so far, here's my input as you begin to draft. As you're writing a draft for us to consider, here's what I think. And then, another commissioner did the same thing. So our staff took all that and began to write a set of draft regulations. That set of draft regulations has been out on the website for many, we put that out for 60 days, I think, for public comment. And then after that public comment period closed, then that went in front of our Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is a group of citizens that are, it's a statutory board, and they sit and they make recommendations on land use to the Board of County Commissioners. So they heard this item and they agreed to that draft regulations. So they stamped approval on that. The next step is for that to come to us. The problem is something was lost in the translation on that draft set of regulations, because what was essentially transmitted to our staff really in our notes and from a legal perspective, they wrote something that was more broad than that, and we have absolutely been getting challenged on that draft set, and that we have overstepped. And I agree. I don't think that that was something that, too many of the things within that we can't do. So somebody asked me a question recently about fracking, well, a number of questions, but could we vote to ban fracking next week? The answer is yes, we could. We could do that. And we would immediately be challenged, we would be sued, and we would lose, because we can't do it, we don't have the authority. So when the question is, can you do this? Sure, we could do pretty much anything we wanted to, but we would lose in the challenge. That's what land use is all about. Land use is protected by law, and we don't have discretion over many parts of land use. So we have taken that from staff and said, this is really not the direction that the board gave, and we need to get this to a point where we believe that we are more in line, and then build from there perhaps, depending on what happens with this legislation that's coming out of the legislature. That's a snapshot of where we are today. On Tuesday, this comes in front of our board for a formal hearing, and that is where it's an action item, which means we get to vote on it. Up until now, they've been work sessions. We never vote work sessions, public town halls, things like that. This is the first chance we've had to actually vote on this issue, and that's Tuesday. And that's where we will sit down, and I'm sure it'll be a long day, and we will go through that and figure out where it is that we think, again, this is from all those perspectives, with legal assistance and with all the things that we have learned to set forward a set of regulations that we think will be sustainable going forward in this industry. And we know that may change depending on the outcome. So part of what we're doing in kind of pulling back is saying, hey, wait a minute. We were on track in some good ways here, but on the other hand, we know that the legislature is just about to come on in here and change a whole bunch of things for El Paso County. And so before we go and get crazy with this, we need to hold on and see what the legislature is going to do. So that's a snapshot. So let me open it up for questions, and we'll try to fill some things in. Sir?
Yes, I was very glad to hear you said that you actually could vote to ban it. So, and saying that you could actually do anything. So if you could vote to ban it, and then, as you say, lose, could you challenge the verdict then?
It's called Rule 106, and we would not be able to challenge it, no. Nope. Nope. So we won't vote, I'm just going to tell you, we will not vote to ban it, because we don't have the authority to do so.
But you just said that you could, and then even if you could challenge it, I mean, could you do other things to protect your constituents? I mean, since you said you can do anything, could you do as much as possible to protect your
I
constituents?
think you can hear what I was trying to express. We could stand here and do anything, but we would be challenged. We would then be, we would lose that challenge. We would spend a lot of taxpayer money in that challenge, and it would be irresponsible for us to do that. So I was painting a picture as to, sure, we could stand here and do it. We could stand here and say nobody gets to build anymore in El Paso County. But we would be challenged. It's against the law. We would lose, and that's not our responsibility. And we as a board don't believe in that. So I hope you understand what I was trying to say. Yes, we could do that, but we're not going to, because we will lose. And that is not in the best interest of this county to behave in such a way, because we will not win that battle. The battle for that needs to happen at the legislative level. And if that's what we want to do in El Paso County, we need to take that to the state, which is what's happening right now with all of this potential legislation, and work that through the state level. We just don't have the authority to do that.
Yeah, currently, how much acreage do you know or estimate is either leased or owned by the oil companies?
Oh, I can't remember the number. There's 18,000 acres that were purchased in Banning Lewis Ranch, which is city-owned. That's not a county piece of land. That's 18,000 acres just right there. I don't have the number off the top of my head, ma'am. I'm sorry. We have gone over this so many times, but I can't remember that number.
Are you in discussion with the legislative body about your county's position?
Absolutely we are.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And is the responsibilities for the utilities and the road maintenance, is that going to be on the citizens, or is that going to be on the oil companies?
That's on the oil companies.
Okay. And now, what is the state setback regulation right now? Since you said the county cannot exceed the state setback, what is the state?
I believe it's 500 feet.
So that means
Don't quote me on that, but I think it's
500 feet. So that's like less than 2 football fields away from someone's property line and or house. If their house is near the property line, that's where that oil.
That's correct. And I'm sure you're aware that in horizontal drilling, because we're not just talking about vertical drilling, this is new technology, not completely new technology, but fairly new to El Paso County, which is where some of this is coming from, that we drop a vertical well, let's say it's 6,000 feet, and then we go horizontal for a mile. And companies are protected by certain laws that will allow them, if they own those mineral rights, to go ahead and extract all the way out. That may go under your property. And if they own the mineral rights, they can do that.
All right, now you said about markers. You're assuming, and I'm in agreement with you on this, you're assuming that there is a good possibility of damage to the water, as has been found in Ohio, which has just recently banned fracking. The state of Ohio has banned it. Arkansas, I believe, has followed if they didn't do it before them. Oklahoma is in the process of doing this.
I am not assuming. I'm stating that I think it would be a good practice for both parties. That's the landowners, which in some cases the oil companies are the landowners, but the landowners and the private property owners, so that if something were to happen, and in the state of Colorado we have no examples of water contamination from fracking. We have examples of them from surface spills,
right,
but not from the fracking process.
What about the EPA?
And so if we have, if there were to be, it's a secondary protection. If there were to be some contamination, now you as a property owner can go and say, I know that you, whatever oil company, did this because this is your marker. And on the other side of the coin, I think they should want to do this because if they didn't do it, it will exonerate them.
Okay.
So that's why we push for that.
Then say that I, as a property owner, decide that I don't want to lease my property. They go ahead and they go underneath my property because my neighbor has decided that they want to do this. Then my choice then is to sue my neighbor and the oil company because my neighbor allowed this and the oil company did this and it damaged the water of my property and ruined my livestock's future, etc. They've ruined my future, my ranch and everything. So my neighbor that allowed this and the oil company would both be held responsible?
Depends on who owns the mineral rights.
Okay. have you distributed or have you made aware that the insurance company's risk factor analysis of the fracking areas means that property insurance is going to go up dramatically?
We have heard reports of that.
And are the constituents aware of this?
Some are aware of that. We've got different studies, but here again, I'm not trying to pass the buck. I'm living in the reality of what we are able to do.
I understand, and I'm just asking the question.
Right, but no, we have definitely gotten input on that. Are all the constituents aware of that? I do not know if they are.
Because
we encourage, when people do contact us, again, well, I'm not an attorney and I don't get involved in those kinds of, those leases, but we encourage them, please don't sign a lease without an attorney. I'm very happy to give that kind of advice. Please don't do that. Go out, get an attorney, speak to an attorney, talk about what mineral rights you have. Do you have separate mineral rights? What do you know about your land? And find out those kinds of things. So we've been encouraging people to do that, but that's more of that private transaction that we don't
But
get
whose
involved in.
responsibility is it to inform the little cul-de-sacs of land, of homes that are out there that are not ranchers and farmers? They're just people that have bought land out in the county and they live in this little community, and their insurance is going to go up also. Who's going to inform them?
Well, if they are leasing their land and they're approached to have their land leased, and we've been out and met with them.
It won't be a matter of whether or not they have leased their land to oil or
Right.
anything. It's a matter that they live in the county that has the fracking,
Right.
and their insurance could go up as much as 300, 400%.
Well, again, I think the answer, quite honestly, is probably, if a person is leasing, the answer to who, how they get all that information is them. They have to go out and get that information. We can't provide that for them. We don't know what the nature of that contractual agreement is. If they don't, everybody needs to go out and find out what they can find out about their mineral rights on their property. Everybody needs to go out and find out about whether they've got, do you have a water determination on your land? That's very important. And then if the company, which is allowed by law, is drilling horizontally and is going under your land, you probably just you've got to go out and find out and be made aware of that, because the company is not, there are certain things that by law they don't have to provide. So there's, what I'm saying, we can't go out and we can't right now, under the law as it is, go out and say, company X, you're drilling here, and we know you're gonna, here's what you own. We don't have all that information. We don't have, we know what you own and who you're going to impact and have you contact them. We don't have that capability, and we don't have the authority to mandate that they contact all landowners in the area or all landowners in the county to say this could change the county scheme. I hope I'm expressing this well enough. This is why we're talking about the legislation. This is why there's very competing legislation in the state, and it's going to be a very big issue in the next several months, because these are issues that people want to know about, and I don't know whether they'll resolve it all. I don't know whether there's a perfect solution. What is that perfect solution between that protection of those private property rights and the overall scheme of things?
No fracking. It's easy.
It's
no
the best,
fracking.
right? Well, again, take that up with the state legislature.
It's basically, yeah, and I agree, it's got to be a legislature basis, but it's
Right.
kind of like, to me, it's kind of like saying, well, my friend here just got in the car, my friend is really, really drunk, and I'm watching him go down the road, and he's going to hit somebody, and boy, I can't call anybody because,
Well,
gee golly,
And you have to, and I hear what you're saying, but one thing that I'm careful to do is not necessarily look at Pennsylvania and Ohio and places like that, because their geology is different from here. And we're not drilling at 1,000 feet. We're talking about drilling at 6,000 feet. In northern Colorado, we're talking about drilling at 12,000 feet. I mean, it's really phenomenal technology, the way they get that deep. And we're not even in, granted, the casing goes through all the aquifers. We know that. Casing is everything in a protected well. And if they don't have the casing properly done, and if they're not acoustically testing that at proper intervals, then how do we know that the casing hasn't split? All these kinds of things. We know all that. All of that is regulated. Again, it's just not regulated at our level, and that's what we're talking about. Can we go in and say, you need to do acoustics testing every single month?
Okay, and I apologize if I'm taking up too much time. I know the rest of you have questions, and I'm almost done. But are you, since you said you've studied the geology, then you are aware there are hundreds of faults along the Front Range, ranging from, you know, Wyoming to New Mexico. We've already had several, you know, minor little earthquakes that have happened in the recent months down in southeastern Colorado. And there are predicted that there are going to be many, many more. We're on faults right here in El Paso County. And when you're talking about that, you're talking about the earth moving and how is their technology going to withstand the earth moving type of stuff. So there's a lot of questions that I have. And frankly, for me, if I'm given a choice of a can of oil and a bottle of water, the water is everything. As you said earlier, water is life. The oil, that's...
I agree. But one thing I'm going to say is that I don't believe, and again, this is just me speaking, that they have to be mutually exclusive. I believe that we've got history of being able to produce energy, many different kinds of energy, safely. And I cannot stand in my role, in my position, and decide that it's guaranteed that it's going to be bad. Neither can I stand here and guarantee anybody that it's always going to be great. I can't. And if anybody tries to do that, they're not telling you the
They're
truth.
lying, yes, I would think.
So, but that's not my role. I've got to put on a very, very pragmatic hat because I've got to stay within my role. And again, fundamentally, I've got to protect private property rights. And like I said, that doesn't just mean the leaseholder, it means everybody. It's a balance. And we're working very, very hard to strike that balance. And there's a lot of this that has to deal with at the legislature level.
Amy, I didn't get a straight answer from COGCC when they were spoke down at the City Council chambers. And I had asked Chief Inspector Johnson, I think his name was, that how can you stand there and say that there's no incidents of fracking fluids affecting water, when in fact, 38 instances state on COGCC's records, I believe 38, but they can't talk about because they have gag orders and they're paid off by the oil company. So how do we know that's not the true science if they have the sealed record?
Well, like I said, it's fracking, it's not the extraction. Some are saying that if there's a crack in the casing of pipe, you bring the fluid up, and then it contaminates that level, that counts as fracking. We're talking about fracking at the frack level. And if it's a closed file, then how can I?
Right.
If I can't read the file, then I can't. What I'm basing my comments on are the files that I can read, on the information that I do have, and that's the best that I can work with.
Well, you should preface your statement by saying, according to the records we have that we can't read, there have been no reported incidents of fracking fluids contaminating well water.
According to what I can read, there's nothing that we have seen.
But in Wyoming, finally, the EPA admitted there has been indications of fracking fluids affecting well water in Wyoming.
Right. And there are lots of questions about that because I assure you, for every report that I get on this side, I get a report on this side. I assure you that happens. It's both sides. It is. We go over here and I'll come back.
I think at some point, I realize it's meant to be given the bit. At some point, I think we have to balance benefit to risk. And she mentioned it, and now I'll keep between a glass of water and a glass of oil. Realistically, in our standard of living, we can't do without either. Now, we know about the threatened Iranian action in the Strait of Hormuz. If that opens up, all that OPEC oil coming to this country. I regret that our president chose to torpedo the Keystone Project out of Alaska or out of Canada. That would have been a big help if we wanted a big help with some energy. So, but I think we have to realize that nothing in this life is completely secure. The only people who found complete security are buried. So we have to accommodate and recognize there has to be a certain amount of risk taken in what we do. Now, I read your article in this morning's paper, and I thought you handled it very, very well. And when it comes to this discussion between the Planning Commission and the Council, the Commissioners, that this modus operandi that the OGCC is proposing might be a way to go on this thing. That would enable us in El Paso County to address land use rules and work out. We have enough expertise in El Paso County where we can do this. go ahead and work out rules that are applicable to El Paso County, that are compatible, that are acceptable to El Paso County, but also acceptable to the OGCC. So I think that this is one answer. Let's consider this modus operandi approach and go then to that group with that can accommodate both their position on this and our position.
I appreciate that, and I assure you that that's a prevailing thought. And there are some things that we have been talking about that we think that we can continue to put. Let me give you one example of something that I'm willing to push a little bit on against what could be perceived as an operational conflict in the law. And even with this, there's not much I can do. But it's the pit system. And if you've ever seen how these wells operate and how they are drilled and essentially stood up, there has to be a pit of fracking fluids. Of drilling fluids. When you're putting that drill down hole and you're drilling, it has to be lubricated. And essentially they use water and oil to do that. And then as they're drilling, they're pulling out cuttings. Now when you get deep into the earth, you're pulling out cuttings that are filled with different minerals. Oil, the three things that are produced from any one of these wells are water, natural gas, and oil. So you're pulling those, you're extracting those. And those go into these pits. Some sites have a great big open pit. In fact, some even have pits that are not lined. And I don't think that's responsible at all. You really get leaching into the groundwater. Other operators will use what's called a closed loop system. It's not open. You can't have wildlife getting into it. You don't have, they're not as large. They're operated in a very different way. And we think that we'd like to say, of course, you know, you're going to come in. These companies are coming. You can't stop them. These companies are coming. We'd like to ask you to do a closed loop pit system. And for the most part, they have, the 4 permits that we have in El Paso County, they're saying, okay, we agree with that. But the state is saying you can't put that in there unless you put a waiver. So that's one that to me, it's just good common sense. It's good practices on a well site. And I'd like to push for that a little bit, but as I push for it, it'll probably be in the draft regulations, in the regulations we approve, but it'll be in there with a waiver. Because if that company doesn't want to do it, by law, we don't have the authority to tell them to do it. We're just going to we're going to push them to do it. And what you're saying, I think, is the approach that we're trying to say we're going to start from. And if there are these other issues, just as you said, we're going to continue to work on those, and we're going to see what the legislation looks like.
It's coincidental, not coincidental, but I live in Colorado Springs and I own land in Elbert County. And at this moment, as we speak, these same discussions are going on in Elbert County.
Yep.
Because they receive the same communication from the council.
Yep.
We're going through the same arguments there as we are here.
Yep, we've been studying their regs.
And out of all of this, well, I think anyway, depending on what legislation is going to it's going to be this recognition of this memorandum of understanding. I think that has to be the key word.
Right. You know, there's also, you brought up a great point. There's another way to look at this, and we're talking about this extensively. Remember that if we enact a set of regulations, that's a regulatory document. Now that becomes, you know, our law of the land here in El Paso County, like our land development code. Now, if you just put that out there for everything that's done, is that the right way to go about it? Because this is a big county, and it's very diverse in its geology. You can go up, you pass, now you're in a mountainous region, you go out on the eastern plains, you can go down to Fountain and it is dry, and you can be in Monument and it's snowing like crazy, and it's a very different place. The water is different, everything is different. So remember that a set of regulations is that foundation piece that the law sits on for the local level. Now, when we have different sites, and right now they're kind of clustered in the same area, but it could expand, we don't know. And even though they're in the same general area, there are some differences, like drainage, for example. You know, I never used to think about drainage like I do now. I'm driving down the road and I'll tell my husband something about that ditch, and he's like, you are such a geek. You never used to talk about roads, and I talk about roads all the time, and what's wrong with that asphalt over there, and how we need to fix that. So I'm always thinking about drainage. But that's site-specific. So how about a foundational document that tries to put these best practices in place, and then site-specific conditional applications where we set specific conditions working on that specific site that works well for that. So it's not such a cookie cutter approach, and we're trying to accomplish that. And we can do that. We do that regularly on land use, and it fits well here. So we're working on that.
Problems I see and been reading about though, is the state going to give you that any latitude at all to be able to do it?
Well, we're already pushing on that latitude. We are. And that's the question. We don't know exactly what will come out of this legislative session. And so that's why we're having discussions with them. And that's why there's going to be, I expect to be a great deal of discussion about that very thing. What kind of latitude is the state going to give us? So we are going to be listening, talking, interacting on this argument quite a bit to determine what we do here and what we're asking the state to give us. You know, El Paso County is the only county in the state of Colorado that does not have a business personal property tax. So people have said, oh, you just want this all to come in here because you want this big windfall of money. Well, we're not going to get a big windfall of money. We can't tax them on their property. It's just, we're not going to get that. So now when they come in and they beat up the roads, how do we remediate that? That's why we've got to have that in place before they start drilling. Because that's your property. And are we going to, there are many ways we can do that. Do we dictate the truck routes that they take? And if they're not on 6 inches of good asphalt, do we make them pave that before they use them? And then even though they're on 6 inches of asphalt, if they're standing up the size of a well, they're going to beat that up. And do we make them pour the new asphalt? Because we don't have all that manpower to do that. I don't want the cash because we don't have the manpower and equipment. I'd rather have them do the mitigation on the roads themselves. So how about the gravel roads? We're going to have them come in and put down 6 inches of gravel, and are we going to dictate the class of gravel they have to use? And how about magnesium chloride for the dust suppression? We want to get all that in place before they start rolling in here. And we do have that authority right now, and we want to make sure very, very carefully that the state does not take that authority away from us. And I don't think they will. I don't think that's part of their discussion because that they admit and agree that that's a very reasonable local land use issue. I'm making sure, and I've talked to the state, I've talked to the industry, I've talked to our staff and everybody. Fire protection plans. Sounds silly, but it's very legitimate under our mandates. Noxious weed management. We're mandated by the state to control noxious weeds, and that matters for people who have livestock and understand what that means. And drainage plans and things like that. So we're looking at those kinds of land use items and saying, don't take our authority over there. So I don't know if that helps answer your question. Again, here, we got to go here.
Commissioner, the markers in the water is a great idea, but it's only a good, effective idea as long as you have a monitoring program. So my question is, under the current county permitting process, can't you establish the fee on cultural resources for any developer to help build water quality monitoring points that are maybe managed by a third party that's not associated with the company?
We think so. That's actually part of my my direction with staff this week. And again, I'm one of 5 commissioners, so they've taken all this input from all of us and try to juggle it, and then we'll hash it out in public on Tuesday. But I think that we can get there. I think we can do that, and I think we need to do that. I think baseline well testing is hugely important, and I don't think that they have a good argument as to why it wouldn't be important and why we shouldn't be demanding that they do that.
I think right now, most of the water quality testing is for by the landowner, or the homeowner.
It is.
That's probably unfair, maybe, but
I'm going to agree on that. I mean, there's these are these things that you got to look at best practices and what matters to everybody and what's that. Again, that to me that's a factor in the property protection. So we are pushing on that, and I think we're going to be okay there. I think.
one last point.
Yes.
And I'll shut up.
No.
So this development has been occurring at rapid rates in other parts of the counties around the state, even Wyoming. Some counties have a checklist for landowner property protection rights. You can't do them legal rights.
Right.
There's a list of check marks that you can give them, things that they can consider, and I'm wondering if the county has considered something like that for the landowner.
We have talked about that, but I'm so glad you brought that up because I don't think that's in any of the iterations for Tuesday. So I will take that back and see, because we have talked about that, but honestly, I think that might have slipped through. I'm thinking through all the documents. I don't know that it's in there, so I'll check them out.
So let's check this for property rights, for property owners' rights.
That's correct. Helps property owners kind of know what to ask and what to look for. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question, actually two questions on two of your R words, remediation and reclamation. It's my understanding that should fracking go forward, the county shall be included in either a multi-plaintiff or class action, probably multi-plaintiff action. Are you aware how long it takes for such an action when it goes through the appellate levels to get all the way to the Supreme Court?
You mean the action against the county?
Yes.
Sure, it takes a very long time and a lot of resources.
Well,
We get sued on things all the time.
Do you know approximately how long?
Well, no, I'm not going to take a guess. Probably 3 years.
I've had one go the route to the Supremes, and it is approximately 5 years, and yes, it is extremely expensive. And in the meantime, seems to be a movement nationwide. The regs in the EPA have not been rescinded. The enforcement of same has been. But there seems to be a very, very hard push these days to go forward with not only the regs, but enforcement of those regs. And so therefore, I think we have to, this county has an absolute, of necessity, obligation to consider not only what goes on as far as regs are set at the state level, but also all the ramifications of what EPA can, in the past has been able to do, extremely heavy findings. And I think since we have been given, now pardon the legalese, I'm only an administrative law, pardon me, but the legalese is notice, and we have been given more than sufficient notice regarding lack of reclamation. Once the poisoning occurs, it's there to stay. There is no true remediation that can occur. And this has happened in other areas of the country that are now grieving over their lack of taking sufficient notice and protecting, particularly their waters. And you might want to research a little bit into the Chesapeake Bay, where the head litigator for the EPA was pulling her hair out in approximately 2003 when she was stripped of her authority to go forward and to enforce regulations. And now when you go to the Chesapeake, you walk into the restrooms and you see, warning, please do not drink the tap water. This cannot be reclaimed, what has happened, the poisoning that's occurred. So I'm just saying that we have sufficient notice, we in the county, and it is extremely wise from a legal point of view not to sacrifice. Right now the county is having extreme difficulties in providing very basic necessities such as protection of the elderly, protection of youngsters. And many of our county agencies have been way cut back. Magistrate and judge friends of mine are grieving and angsting over some of the terrible things that are occurring with these cutbacks. Right now, we certainly cannot afford to take on the types of suits that I have been hearing about coming.
And I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
And one last little thing, let's all say no to greed.
Ma'am, as you are, ma'am, in the same way that you are saying and threatening that we will be sued to allow this industry to come in, as I have stated, we do not have the authority to tell them no. In the same way, I assure you that I get threatened every day if we don't allow it to come in. So that's why we have attorneys, and we will stand, as I've said, in our role in a very pragmatic position, realizing the reality of our authority, and we will move forward. And that is exactly why you said that we need to be considering this. That's exactly what we're doing. We are considering all of these things. And again, I will state it again, I do not believe that this means that absolutely our county is going to be poisoned and that we are all going to have to move away and this will be a wasteland. They do not exist individually. We can do this with best practices. It has been done before safely, and it can be done safely again. Again, no guarantees on either side, but there is risk in everything moving forward, and we have to move forward in that authority, and we'll let the attorneys sort out the rest. We have a responsibility here in this county. So I know there was a question back here, and then we'll go back. I'm going to go to those who.
If I might just one last.
I'm going to go to those who have not asked a question yet.
To respond to you. We are in a very unusual situation here as far as our water supply. We have far more of a risk involved, and that must be constantly and well considered.
We have one of the most rigid water supply laws in the state of Colorado in El Paso County. We have a 300-year water rule where virtually every other county in the state has a 100-year water rule for sustainability. Sir.
I live in Rock River. I learned of a new insurance when I moved into that house. It was called mine subsidence insurance.
In Rock River, I'll bet that's true.
Now, it doesn't include the slow movement of the hillside as it comes down and crushes my house. That's something different. Is there going to be a oil and gas drilling subsidence insurance required to cover the earthquakes that are happening? Is this happening in other communities? We live on a slope, and when you break something at the bottom of the slope, or even on the slope, it moves down. So it's a question. This is the new tax rate. If I have to buy a new kind of insurance,
It's available.
if it's available, but this is something new, and I didn't know about mine subsidence insurance when I got here. So my question is, am I going to learn about a new insurance that I need to protect my property from something that's happening in the county? That's the first question. I don't think you have an answer, but
I don't have an answer. And you know, where you are, you know, the permits that have been pulled are in the eastern part of the county, and that doesn't mean that they won't be pulled near you or closer to you in some way. Certainly could happen, and it's not just site specific. This is all very broad based. And when you do something up here, what's happening underground and a mile underground, you know, affects large swaths of land, perhaps. I can't answer that question. I don't know if you'll be required to. You will not be required to do that by the county. That's not
right.
something
We're not
we do.
required to.
Right.
It's prudent, because otherwise I'm going to
Right.
lose my house. So
Right.
that's my first question. The second is, I've been to San Wyoming, I've been to Billings, I've been to Commerce City. And as a military retiree, if this area begins to smell like Indian, I'm leaving. And I heard people talking about primary employers. As a retiree, military retiree, I'm like a primary employee, meaning that my salary comes from outside of the city and I spend it. And I don't think I'm alone. I think any retiree that has the ability to say, it stinks here, I'm leaving. Consider that. I'm not going to stay. I think we're fracked. I don't think this is an if, it's a how do we
Well,
best
yeah,
deal
they've got
with
the
it.
land. Yeah.
Right, so I accept it, and I appreciate what you're doing. But I'm telling you right now, if this begins to stink, literally stink, I'm leaving.
That's too late.
Well, but I can go someplace else. I can move further away from it.
It's like house on the lot.
I will, but I'm not going to stay. And I lived in Greeley. I was in Well County, where a lot of these wells were, and I didn't smell the well, but I did smell other things in the well. And I didn't want to stay there.
Pig's lunch pits, yeah.
I didn't want to stay there.
Go to Fort Morgan and it smells
Right,
better. Yeah.
so I did leave. And it's not a threat, it's just, are we considering the value
Yes.
of people that will just say, this isn't why I live here?
Right. And the answer is yes, absolutely. And in all these conversations, and again, I'm probably going to say it again. Let me just say it again. And I'm not trying to pass the buck on this, but some folks are approaching us in a way that somehow we've got more discretion than we have. We don't. We simply don't. And you just have to look at the way the law works under the state constitution. I'm a constitutional officer. I took an oath to uphold that constitution, and I will do that in every possible way. That's the oath that I took. And I, by that, I am dictated to abide by that. And under the statutes, this is the authority that I have. That's why I keep saying, this is why we're having conversations with the state. This is why I encourage everyone who has concerns to take it to the state where we have the ability to do these kinds of things in terms of the land use. We will do them. And we've already talked about air quality, mitigation, all different kinds of things there. Some of it's pushing too far. We can't get there. Again, whatever's regulated can't be over-regulated by us. So we are having those conversations, and much of it does have to occur at the state level that deals with some of the produced kinds of issues that exist. I know that doesn't help a whole lot. Wait.
Obviously, my name is Wade Anderson, and I'm
Speak up.
obviously,
Speak up.
I'm very rare.
I know. I want everybody to hear you.
I'm obviously an Amy supporter, but I mentioned something that probably a lot of you saw on Eric. I saw an interview Eric on Fox News, I think about 2 weeks ago, with a couple down in Louisiana that own a 160-acre parcel that are now billionaires because part of their land was part of a 640-acre drilling site, and they discovered a big, huge area of natural gas down there. And so I don't own any land out here, but my family owns still the mineral rights up in Parker, Colorado, on a piece of property that my grandfather farmed for a lot of years. And who are we, or I'm not going to, I would be very upset if Amy or any of the other commissioners or any elected officials sit there and said, well, you don't have the right to go out and suddenly have a windfall of any sort like that. As long as it's done safely or as safe as possibly can be done. I don't feel any one person should be able to tell everybody out there, no, you can't go out there and possibly explore the fact that you have a wealth underground, as long as you're taking the proper precautions. It's not a question of Amy. That's just my position.
As long as it's not in the back of somebody, other property owners, so we don't lose their property rights and the water and the value.
Absolutely. As long as it's not going to hurt the other people's water. Because you're right, everybody out, especially on the east, if they don't have water that's sustainable, their land's worth zero. And I certainly would not ever want anybody to have that position either.
Thank you.
All right? But I do feel that if I'm a landowner and I own my mineral rights, I should be able to develop.
Yeah, and I think to just address what this gentleman just said, I mean, laws kind of change and people's priorities change, and what we learn about the earth and we learn about the kind of the harm that we're doing and what we can or cannot live with changes. So there was probably a time when a guy would say, hey, I own these slaves and I have the right to beat them. And that we know that we no longer live in a world like that. So there are things that people have to address and take responsibility for and revise our sense of what our rights are. But I'm very distressed on the fact that you were standing there taking a position that, I'm being threatened by suits from the oil companies on this side and threatened by the people on this side, and you know what? I'm going to fight the people. I'm going to capitulate to the oil companies. Hey, we'll lose, but I'm going to fight the people, and we'll fight it till it takes 5 years. I'm kind of distressed by that. But I was really hoping that as a county representative, that you would want to actually have a legacy of saving the people that you represented from environmental degradation, instead of saying, nothing I can do, nothing we can do, you got to talk to the state, nothing we can do. That's called passing the buck. But what I'd really like to see come out of this is I'd like to see a learning opportunity. And what I saw earlier, I'd like to just bring back earlier, a gentleman brought up, called you on a statement that you made that said there's no instances of fracking having contaminated water. And this gentleman said, well, actually there are. I can't remember what the number was, 38, and they're in sealed documents. And apparently, that probably should alter the way you present yourself by saying there are none. And so I'd like to, as a learning opportunity, could I hear how, after this meeting, you are going to present yourself and present those facts in public and say it in a way that doesn't lie and represents the fact that in sealed documents, there is evidence of fracking having contaminated water. Up to you.
Thank you, sir. And first of all, I don't know where you heard me say that I signed with the oil companies. I never even said that the oil companies were going to sue us. We're going to be sued by the state. We're also going to be sued by other property owners, who I also protect, sir. I protect our property owners of all kinds. And I will continue to present myself in the exact same way that I have up until this point. Because the way I'm presenting myself, sir, is in a pragmatic and scientific fashion, listening to all sides, trying to take the best information I can from everybody that is talking about we're going to die and we need to produce and our water is going to be contaminated, absolutely, and drill baby drill, and listen in the middle using my experience, the education that I'm putting myself through on the entire issue, and the law. And I will continue to represent myself in that way. I will not change a thing because I am not lying to anyone. I never have, I never will, and I will represent every constituent that I have in the best way that I can. And that does not mean, sir.
Tell us how you're going to represent. Does fracking contaminate water has fracking contaminated water in Colorado?
I do not have any evidence that is public evidence of any kind that it has. And if there's a document that has been sealed, sir, how do you know that it has? If it is sealed, how do you know what is in it? I have what is in front of me that is public information, that is scientific information, using the best that I can within that. I realize that there are issues in other areas. I realize that there are surface issues. There are issues with drilling through and releasing methane that causes problems. But sir, I will continue to work in exactly the same way I have been, which is in a very pragmatic way, not favoring one side or over the other, but working to make sure that we go forward in the reality of our authority using best practices. And that's the way I will continue to operate. I will not change that, sir.
That sounds like a lie to me. That was dissembling. There's a word for that. When you're saying this is true because, technically, legally, those because of some corrupt process and by which a corporation has been able to seal those records, we don't have to tell you about this. So guess what?
Was it corrupt? Do you have any evidence that it was corrupt?
Well,
we're going to move on to another question. Does anyone have another question? Sir.
I'd like to narrow this as much as I can. My biggest concern is water quality. I own property and I draw my well, or my water meter well in the Dawson application. And that's really what I'm concerned about, is the contamination. The gentleman brought up earlier about monitoring. If I understood correctly, what he's saying is that decomposing could be some publicly monitored wells to see if that aquifer or any others.
Yes.
Is it recommended that as a property owner, I do that personally also, I get baseline water?
And we are recommending that the companies do baseline water testing, and that they keep up with that kind of water testing to continue to show that the water is clear. We're looking to put that into what we put in place.
If I choose to do that at a personal level, does the county department of health, they do water sampling and testing, that I can take something in and have sampled, and I have that on record?
Yes, you can.
So that if you are successful in getting the markers and the drilling fluids put in there,
yes,
if that shows up, then I can say, I didn't have it before, but I do now.
Right, absolutely. And the state will also do that for you. So you can do that at the local level, the state level. You can do your own personal testing, but we think that the oil companies ought to be able to be coming in here doing some of their own testing. And again, that's what we think that there should be that kind of baseline and regular testing. We think that there should be a standard. We think that they have that obligation to do that, and we think that we can hold their feet to the fire to do that. And I think we're going to win on that. That's been challenged to a certain degree. It also goes to memos of understanding, site-specific again, in particular sites where we can create perhaps an even more rigorous kind of testing schedule dependent on the site. And we can put that, if we condition that in an approval of a permit, a local permit, then they have to do that. And that doesn't have to be, as I said before, it doesn't have to be in that foundational regulatory document, but it can be in that specific approval, and we're talking about that. And there are reasons why it would matter more in certain areas than it would in other areas. So we're definitely looking at that. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
Wouldn't it be neat if we could have the oil company pay for our own water tests if we don't trust them?
We've talked about that too.
On the reimbursement, I don't, lab of our choice.
Yes, we have talked about that too, and I think we can get there too. Yep, that's part of what we have told them, that we want to not only keep in, but talk about it a little more about how we can make that happen. I think so too. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, a little bit off the subject, and I realize that a lot of the base thing here is a lot of people are seeing the opportunity of the monetary compensation they'll get on the fact that there's oil. You know, there is oil, these companies are here, they've bought up this land, people are going to be compensated, you know, some maybe a lot, some maybe nothing. We also know the costs are going up. I was just at a meeting with, on Thursday night talking about Pinyon Canyon, and one of the points that was brought up by the folks from Trinidad and the counties, some of the county commissioners, was southeastern and eastern Colorado is considered prime ground for wind energy. Now, wind energy is a future growth product. It means education, it means jobs, it means actually a cleaner way to do stuff. And if we had more energy put towards the wind energy process, that means we would not necessarily need to get the oil. We do need to change. I'm pretty sure that we're all in agreement that the future is not in oil. We only have maybe 100 years worth of oil left. We've got to change stuff. And is it possible that any thoughts can be directed that way? Now, the folks from Trinidad and the counties surrounding stated in the meeting with Colonel McLaughlin that the reason that the wind energy companies are not going in that direction is they're afraid to go up against the Department of Defense, who wants Pinyon Canyon. They know they can't beat them. We don't have that problem in eastern El Paso County. We've got a lot of land, we've got a lot of wind. You folks live out there, you know. We could, you know, as a county commissioner, have you guys examined or put any feelers out in that direction?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I'm sure you're aware there is a wind farm going up in eastern El Paso County.
Right.
Clipper Wind Power is putting up the last number that I heard, and we've never gone under this number, so if anything, it'll increase. 97 different towers will go out there. And I assure you that I get just as many calls about the transmission lines on that power and how that's going to negatively impact the land. So wind energy isn't the thing that everybody gets happy about, because many people don't want those transmission lines running through their land. Well, that's not necessarily true either, but it doesn't have the kind of impacts we're talking about with oil and gas production. That is true. I'm the government.
Right.
Don't hold against me. And I'm not here to help you. And as the government, I don't go out looking for free market enterprise. That's not our role. If the free market wants to come in, and if wind power works, if it is affordable for wind power to come in and generate energy and make that work, because it has to work financially. You can't just have people come in and do this for free. It doesn't work that way. And you can't have government subsidize it, because we subsidize too much already. We've run out of money. The safety net doesn't work. We can't take enough from people to make all this work. So it's not my role to go out and say, yeah, I think there's a great free market enterprise. I could do that as an individual. I'd love to have a business. But I've had business in the past, and sure, you know, if I saw a great business opportunity, I'd go out and pursue it. But in my role as a county commissioner, it is not my role to go out and seek out that type of industry. Now, there's a caveat to that, because my role is, there are parts of what we do that is economic development and making sure that we have a strong economy. But let me tell you, the primary way that I, as a county commissioner, impact economic development of jobs in this county, and that's by getting government out of their way, so that they can come in here and open business and expand business and hire people, and not constantly over-regulate. That's where I, as a county commissioner, have a direct and major impact on jobs, on the free market, on the economy. And that's one of the best things that I can do in that way. So the answer is no, we don't go out and seek out different kind of energy companies like this, except that we certainly solicit business. Come on to El Paso County, because we're ready for, we want you to come here, but that's all business to the degree that we are able to. And that, you know, we're not out there telling oil to come to El Paso County. We're not telling wind to come to El Paso County. We have an economic development corporation that does that. That's a separate agency. But when they do come, we say, look, we are a regulatory body and we want to make it possible for you to do business here. And we do that in a system of best practices that protects everybody's property rights. Now, in this particular situation, this is very different than having a Walmart data center come into El Paso County, for example. That data center comes in, we're excited, that's going to bring jobs, a great deal of revenue in the use tax and things like that, all those great things. But that doesn't have the kind of impact that we have with the passionate issue on the energy issues, and I realize that. But that's probably more of an answer than you were looking for, but that's where our role is.
Gives me a general idea.
Yep. Okay, ma'am, I'm sorry, you had your hand up for a while.
With her wind, I don't know, I know county allows this, and the city does not. But you can now get small windmills and something like that, a canister, like, you know, your rooftop fence, put it in your house, it reduces 200 to 400 watts per month. I mean, that would reduce oil.
Yeah, you know, and I was just looking around because I don't know, I have materials in the car and I wish I had them with me. I have a folder out there. Perfect example, she's talking about wind and individual property owners being able to have a wind generator on their property. I know people in this room who have them. Okay, let me tell you why our code got in the way of that. Not a year and a half ago, I think that was about the time frame. I've been doing this for 4 years now, and time goes by quickly, but we had a code that said you could not have more than one wind generator on your property on like 40 acres or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but the code was very burdensome, and it did not allow people to have more wind generation on their property. Well, who are we to say that? That's outrageous, because people could go out and put it, maybe they have, you know, more use and they do 2 or even 3. Why are we arbitrarily regulating how many they can put on their property within reason? We're not talking about, you know, 80 windmills on, you know, on 10 acres. But why are we telling them that they can't do that when that would reduce their energy dependence? So we changed the code. Simple. You know, we county commissioners wrote the code. It's over all these years, and the code we have been living under was overall adopted in 2005, and that's why I started the Barriers to Business group to start digging out all that code and get rid of all that over-regulation. We're working on that. But we changed it. It's just common sense. So now people can have more wind generators on their property and lessen their dependence. That's where we get in the way of private property rights.
All you have to do is go on the internet and say residential windmills.
Right.
And they're cute.
They are. They're cute. Yes. Okay, any other questions?
Commissioner, we have about 10 more minutes, and we're going to wrap it up.
All right, sir.
Ms. Lathen, I'm Kevin Donovan. I'm Cherokee Metropolitan District's water lawyer. I should have probably introduced myself before. And I appreciate your comments on just dealing with facts, because that really is what you're saying. It's, and I have to deal in facts and weigh this clean up. And I think there's some unique facts in the district that you're representing that Cherokee's in.
Absolutely.
As it relates to this oil and gas drilling. You know, maybe I'll use that board over there if I can just for a second.
Sure. Visuals, I like it.
Visuals.
I don't know if we have any markers over there.
No markers. Okay. Well, as you know, Colorado Springs is on a high arid plateau, and we really have no major source of water. Pueblo has Arkansas, Denver has the South Platte, they're moving it into Colorado, they have the Keystone Project, they had all that. But Colorado Springs has none of that. We're a high arid plateau. And we, at Cherokee, are so reliant on the alluvial wells and on just the renewable groundwater and no surface water. So when you're talking about oil and gas coming in, and you correctly state that one of the big concerns that you have, and you think you have the regulatory power over, is the protection of those alluvial wells. So first of all, from a Cherokee's perspective and the residents of that,
I think that you probably do and do agree that you have that authority with the health department on the alluvial side.
Speak to us a little bit.
The alluvial wells are the surface water that's renewable from water, through rain and snow and that sort of things. And that's when you can monitor that to see whether or not, while they're doing their drilling or fracking or any of that process, you can monitor whether they're contaminated. And that is one source of water in Cherokee. Mr. Asper, who's on the board, knows that we rely quite a bit on those alluvial wells. But we're getting more and more whittled out of them. The second source, of course, is the Denver Basin. And your district, you're in a very unique position in that the Niobrara oil field just kind of tips down at the base of El Paso County. At least they say that's where it ends, where you represent the people. And so Cherokee, you, and your district all kind of overlie the water issue, the gas issue, and the oil production of that. And so you are correct. The Niobrara is down a mile, and the Denver Basin wells are down at about 2,000 feet. So, I mean, there's quite a bit of protection between that. Denver
So where's
Basin
the millions of gallons of water per bore site going to come from for these wells?
What's that?
Where's the millions of gallons of water per bore site for the fracking process going to come from if we're in a hurt for water individually as homeowners?
And this is something that we didn't mention, that I actually have more of a concern over the quantity than I do over the quality. And that's, again, bears out in the science that we're dealing with. But again, they have to show, when they get their state permit, they have to show where their water's coming from. They can truck it in, they can buy it from anybody. But that's more of a concern to me, is where are they going to get the water to frack the wells?
Exactly. Because there is no natural source of it for them to come in here. And of course, Cherokee is water short right now, and yet in the position in your district to develop this jobs. And it's not your place to say which industry should be favored. It's just how can you do that.
But it could be our place and what the state legislation does.
Yeah, so I guess what I hear you're saying is next week we're going to kind of wait to see what the state legislation is going to do, and then act from there.
I don't think we're going to wait. We can't wait next week because we have 3 permits. By now we could have the 4th. We were told about a week ago that they were going to drop a 4th permit here locally for a 4th well. Out along Highway 94, Ultra Petroleum was going to come in with a 4th well permit right along Curtis and 94. It would be fairly close to the highway. I'm told that they want to do it there because they want to get closer to Banning Lewis to kind of see. They want to get a little closer to the geology of Banning Lewis and really see what they might learn from a core for the Banning Lewis property, which they can't access right now because of all the legal issues. But it matters. We do need to get something in place. We can't just sit here and punt this thing until the end of May when the legislature finishes up with whatever they're going to do, because we're going to have them punching some holes out there, and we need to remediate the infrastructure, the surface issues. And some of the, we need, I'm pushing on the closed loop pit system and some of those things. So we do need to get something done. It's not going to be as extensive as what we've been talking about because, and what I say, what has been out there, written by our planners and that went through the Planning Commission because that a lot of that could change dramatically based on legislation. B, that was written in such a way that is an overreach. And we really need to see where we're going to go with that. So it's not going to be a nothing on Tuesday. It can't be. It's not going to be the document that's been out there in its current form.
Under the health regulation.
Some of those we may continue to try to push for at this point. But again, it doesn't mean that it all can be readdressed in May to a certain degree based on the legislation. And that's just a reality. Look, we don't know. I'm not going to stand here and bet anybody on what's going to come out of this legislative session. I mean, if anybody wants to take a bet, you go ahead and do that amongst yourselves. I'm not going to get involved.
I'm just saying, I appreciate you dealing with the facts, that you really do need to monitor those alluvial wells. Sounds like you do have that authority to do so, and I'm glad you get to take a stand and be strong on that. Cherokee, the Denver Basin wells are in rock formation, so if they drill through that, it's very correct that the casing likely should be protected.
Right.
However, the water moves so slowly through there, even if there is a leak 2 miles below the Denver Basin, it might be 100 or 200 years before you find that water. So do think, of course, that you do have that authority to monitor the health and safety and welfare of that renewable source.
We do too, we do too.
That's what we want.
That's what we want.
Cover our butt.
We do.
The one thing I want to push is the gentleman over there, somebody brought up the checklist for homeowners
Yes.
and property owners.
Yes.
I think you guys really need to push on that.
Yes.
Your expertise is much larger than ours, so just giving us a checklist that we can go down and ask questions would help us a lot. So that I would really like.
That we have had so many hours and hours and hours of meetings, and that was in there, and I just need to make sure it made it in. If it didn't, we'll get it. Yep, I appreciate that. And maybe, I know Ron left already. I'll take notes afterwards, or make a note. Remind me. I'll take that back to them actually this afternoon, because we're working over the weekend on this. Okay, so, any other questions? Yes. We'll go to Jack, and then we'll come. I'll take a question.
We have a tentative site for the new VA cemetery, the
Yes, sir.
the Kane Ranch down there.
Yeah.
VA is doing due diligence by examining alternative sites. However, it looks like the Kane Ranch is going to be by far the preferred site. Number one, the land has been donated.
Yep.
The problem is getting water to that site.
Correct.
And it's going to cost some money. It's beyond the resources of the city of Fountain. And I was just wondering if you would like to address that. What can the county commissioners do to help that process?
Well, we are absolutely working on that. Had a discussion about a water pipeline with Fountain last week, and we know that Fountain doesn't have the money, and we know that we don't have the money, and it's a federal project. What we're trying to do is put some things together to work together for some grant monies to do that, and possibly some developer assistance in putting that water together. I don't have answers to give you yet on what it's looking like, but we are working on some intergovernmental agreements that could really turn out to be a great assistance to put that together. I'd like to tell you that it's probably a short time and we'll have some good answers, but I don't want to promise a 4-month time frame and then have it be 8 months or something. But boy, we are working on it. So that's the best answer I've got on that right now. But absolutely, Fountain has been great to work with, and we recognize their limitations and our limitations, and we're putting it together. The state's working with us as well.
Very good.
Yep. We support that so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you all for
Anything
coming
else?
out today.
Okay, thank you. Guys, cookies.
There's your refreshments.
They were a little late because we've been running all day, so